Hello and welcome to the training video for the University of Arizona South Campus Clinic. My name is Erin DeLeonard.
My name is Desiree Wattis.
And today we will be facilitating the training for the implementation of the Parents' Evaluation of Developmental Status, the PEDS, and the Modified Checklist for Autism and Toddlers, the MCHAT. Our team also consists of Catherine Mahosky and Karen Applequist, who are our advisors for the Flagstaff branch of the Arizona AzLEND program, as well as Sydney Rice and Eileen McGrath, who are our direct supervisors for the AzLEND program through Tucson, and Jennifer Andrews and Deepti Deshpande, who are our research consultants on this project. Our goal is to help your clinic successfully implement a screening program for developmental disabilities based on the current American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations. The first tool we will discuss is the PEDS Training tool. Our objectives are as follows. First, we will discuss the difference between surveillance and screening. We will then discuss the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations and the algorithm, or the step-by-step procedure for the implementation of the PEDS. We will talk about the PEDS administration and how to categorize the concerns, the PEDS scoring, as well as the interpretation of each of the paths, and then we will provide you with a list of resources and additional case examples. So we know that early identification leads to earlier evaluation. When we have earlier evaluation, we have earlier intervention services that are provided, which leads to improved child and family outcomes. There are also several studies available showing improved economic development and long-term savings for societies with improved community outcomes. The Perry Preschool Project in Michigan demonstrated $17 of savings for every $1 spent on early childhood development programs. Some of these other community benefits that can be seen in early childhood development programs are higher school success rates, higher rates of graduation, higher employment rates, less criminality, and less teen pregnancy. Now we will talk about the differences between surveillance and screening. It is estimated right now that 12 to 16% of children within the general population have developmental delays. It is important to screen and identify early. So what is surveillance? Surveillance is the process of identifying children at risk of developmental delays by healthcare professionals. Oftentimes at well-child checkups, the doctors ask parents or caregivers if they have any concerns about their child's development. This ongoing and unstructured clinical assessment is considered surveillance, and it is an important part of well-child checkups. Developmental disorders are underdetected in primary healthcare settings in both infants and children. Currently, 7 out of 10 children with developmental disabilities are missed before they enter school, and less than 30% of children with developmental disabilities are identified before kindergarten. Physician assessment alone, without screening, missed 2 out of 3 children with delays. Now that we've discussed surveillance, we are going to talk about what screening is. Screening is the use of a standardized tool to identify and refine the risk. Screening tools are brief, standardized, valid, and reliable. They are also sensitive and specific. So on the left, you will see an example of the PEDS response form, and Desiree will later be discussing the implementation of this form and how to score it. So why do we screen? We screen in order to improve the lives of children and families, as well as contribute to societal savings. Title V of the Social Security Act and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act reaffirm the mandate for the use of a collaborative, community-based system to provide early identification and early intervention for children with developmental disabilities. We also know that screening improves parental satisfaction, and when we have improved parental satisfaction, we see a greater parental engagement, which can improve follow-through. Children that were formally screened for developmental disabilities were more likely to be identified with developmental delays, referred to early intervention services, and eligible for those services, all within a timelier manner than compared to children that received surveillance alone. Most over-referrals are with children who have below average development and also psychosocial risk factors that could benefit from additional services anyways. So from all of this, we know that surveillance alone is not enough. Right now, less than 50% of pediatricians use a standardized developmental screening tool. Now we will go over some of the common myths associated with the implementation of screening tools. The first myth we would like to discuss is that it's too time-consuming or it may interrupt the clinic workflow. We know that the PEDS tool takes less than 5 minutes for parents to complete and 1 to 2 minutes to score. It is a brief questionnaire with only 10 items. The second myth is that it may not be feasible in a busy practice. The American Academy of Pediatrics national project was launched at 17 practices. This study showed greater than 85% of screenings were implemented at appropriate ages by the end of the study. Of those, 14% of the children had failed the screen, suggesting delays. In North Carolina, the Assuring Better Child Health and Development ABCD project was implemented in 10 counties and improved baseline scores from 15% to 70% by year 3. So what are the current American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations? A policy statement in 2006, which was reaffirmed in 2010, recommends surveillance at every well child visit, as well as screening at 9, 18, and 24 months or 30-month visits, or whenever that surveillance demonstrates a risk. Here's an example of an algorithm or a flowchart given by the American Academy of Pediatrics. This chart helps in the decision process of when to screen, how to implement the screener, and how to refer a child. The flowchart is attached within the PowerPoint for your use and can help guide you through the screening process. Now we will discuss the PEDS tool and forms. The PEDS stands for the Parents' Evaluation of Developmental Status. It is a screening tool to detect and address developmental and behavioral problems in children 0 to 8 years old. It takes less than 5 minutes for parents to complete and 1 to 2 minutes to score. It is written in multiple languages at a 4th to 5th grade reading level, and it has both paper and online versions available. The online version scores the forms automatically and provides you with results. The PEDS tool identifies 74 to 80% of children with disabilities. This is the tool's sensitivity. It identifies 70 to 80% of children without disabilities. This is the tool's specificity. The PEDS also has predictive and non-predictive concerns. We see on the PEDS that children with one predictive concern are 8 times more likely to have needs that are eligible for services. Children with 2 or more predictive concerns are 20 times more likely to have needs that are eligible for services. The PEDS will sort children into developmental or behavioral risk categories based on high, moderate, or low risk. The score and interpretation forms can be used longitudinally across multiple visits for the child. We will help you through the following process of administration, scoring, as well as interpretation and referrals. Now Desiree will talk about the PEDS screening tool and how to score.
Let's begin by discussing how you will administer the PEDS paper response form and categorize the concerns expressed by the parent or caregiver. If the child is 9, 18, or 24 months, you will administer the PEDS paper response form. The parent or caregiver will receive this form in addition to their other intake forms when they enter the clinic for their well child exam. The medical assistant will offer assistance to the parent in completing the response form and ensure that they've received a form in their parent's primary language. If the child is not 9, 18, or 24 months, but the parent has expressed a concern about their development, you will administer the PEDS response form and the parent will complete this form. This is an example of a blank response form. You will see the top 2 lines consist of the child's name, parent's name, child's birthday, child's age, and today's date. The form consists of 10 questions. The first and last question are open-ended questions asking about the child's learning, development, and behavior. Questions 2 through 9 are more specific questions and ask the parent to specify if they have no concern, if they do have a concern, or if they have a little concern. There's a comment section for the parent to provide details about their concerns. These questions ask about the specific parts of the child's development, such as communication, fine and gross motor skills, adaptive, social and emotional, and cognition. When the parent or caregiver completes filling out the paper response form, you will review the form for completedness. You are ensuring that all of the questions have been answered. If some of the questions have not been answered, you will work with the parent to answer the questions in an interview-like style. After the form has been completed, the physician will categorize the concerns expressed by the parent on the paper response form. Ensure that you read through all of their answers and comments. You are taking what the parent has written and categorizing their concerns into one of the 5 developmental domains. Be sure to read all of the answers, as parents don't always answer the question that is asked. For example, they may list communication concerns in a question that asks about gross motor skills. If a little is marked, categorize this as a concern. You will check the domain once if the parent expresses multiple concerns in the same category. For example, if they write that their child tantrums, is hyperactive, and bites, you will place 1 check mark under the domain of behavior. If you are ever unclear, you can refer to the PEDS brief guide available to you that will provide you examples of how to categorize concerns. For the next 2 slides, I will ask that you listen to the concern and categorize it into the appropriate developmental domain. You may work with a partner or write down your response. If you read a response form in which the parent wrote, "She doesn't seem to understand us," what developmental domain would you categorize that concern? You would categorize it as a concern of receptive language. "Nobody understands what he says but me." That is a concern of expressive language. "Can't do what other kids can do." Global/cognition. "Clumsy, falls a lot." Gross motor. "Is a messy eater." Fine motor. "Late to walk." Gross motor. "Temper tantrums." Behavior. "Not potty trained." Self-help. "Mean, does not have friends." Social and emotional. "Trouble hearing" would be categorized under other. Let's take a look at an example. We'll look at Roger. He is 2.5 years old. This is an example that was provided to us by the PEDS National website, and it may be similar to what parents express, or it may not. The parent has filled out the response form and provided a lot of commentary that will help you categorize their concerns. When asked about Roger's learning, development, and behavior, the parent wrote, "I'm worried about how my child talks and relates to us. He says things that don't have anything to do with what's going on. He is oblivious to anything but what he is doing at that moment. He's not doing as well as other kids in many ways." When the parent was asked about how Roger talks and makes speech sounds, they indicated that they are concerned and wrote, "He just repeats things like Wheel of Fortune." When asked about how Roger understands what is said to him, they marked they are a little concerned and noted, "I can't tell what he understands or if he's just ignoring us." When asked how Roger uses his hands and fingers to do things, the parent noted that they are not concerned. He's good with manipulatives, but sometimes he does a lot of the same things over and over, like flicking lights and spinning wheels on the car. How does Roger use his arms and legs? The parents are not concerned and stated that he is very coordinated and fast. How does Roger behave? The parents are concerned and noted that he has lots of tantrums. How does Roger get along with others? The parents are concerned. He just doesn't seem interested in even watching other children. How is Roger learning to do things for himself? The parent is not concerned and stated that Roger is very independent. How is Roger learning preschool or school-age skills? The parent is not concerned and noted that he is too young for that sort of stuff. When asked to list any other concerns, the parent wrote, "We spend a lot of time playing and talking with him, and this seems to be helping some. I do wonder about his hearing sometimes, though." We will now move to the PEDS score form to categorize your concern. Here's an example of that form. You will see that this is a longitudinal form and can be used for a child from 0 to 3 months all the way up to 7 to 8 years. You will locate the correct column for Roger's age, in this case 2 years, and always remember to correct for prematurity up to 24 months. Based on the comments provided by the parent, you will place a check in the appropriate developmental domain. The comment, "He is not doing as well as other kids in many ways," you will place a check mark in the global/cognitive domain. He says things unrelated to what is going on and repetitive. That will go under expressive language. Can't tell what he understands indicates a concern in receptive language. Repetitive actions, flicking lights, indicates a concern in behavior. And I want to point out that the parent did not demonstrate a concern, but you as the health professional do feel that is a concern, so you will indicate that. The comment of lack of relatedness and obliviousness is a concern of social and emotional skills. Unsure that Roger hears well, you will mark that as a concern in the other. And I want to draw your attention to the shaded and unshaded boxes. The shaded boxes indicate a significant concern that is predictive of a developmental disability, and the unshaded boxes indicate a non-significant concern that is not predictive of developmental disabilities. This information will assist you in scoring. Now we will discuss scoring and interpretation of paths. To reiterate, you will always add your concerns, but you will never remove the parent's concerns. You will total the number of concerns in the shaded box into the large shaded box at the bottom. Remember, the shaded box represents significant concerns. That is to say, they're predictive of developmental disabilities. You will then total the number of concerns in the unshaded boxes into the large unshaded box at the bottom. These are non-significant concerns and are not predictive of developmental disabilities. This is an example of a completed score form. You have placed a check mark in the developmental domains in which you and the parent has expressed concerns. You have totaled the number of check marks in the shaded boxes and placed this total in the large shaded box at the bottom. You have totaled the number of check marks in the unshaded boxes and placed this total in the large unshaded box at the bottom. You are now ready to determine the path for referral. There are 5 paths determined by the scores in the shaded and unshaded boxes. I'll give you a brief summary and then go into each path in detail. Path A and B are chosen if there are significant concerns that are predictive of a developmental disability. These paths are chosen based on the score in the shaded box. Path C is chosen if there are non-significant concerns that are not predictive of a developmental disability. Path D is chosen if there are issues with parent communication. You will use Path D if the score in both the large shaded and unshaded boxes are 0, but you still have concerns about the child. Path E is chosen if there are no concerns and the child is developing in a typical manner. Your decisions, referrals, and advice that you provide to the parent will be recorded on the interpretation form. Like the score form, the interpretational form is longitudinal. You may recall that Roger had 4 significant concerns that are predictive of a developmental disability and 2 non-significant concerns that are not predictive of a developmental disability. Because Roger has 2 or more significant concerns, you will follow Path A. Once you have determined Roger's path, you are asked, are there 2 or more concerns about self-help, social, emotional, school, or receptive language skills? In the case of Roger, the answer is yes. Thus, the recommendation is a referral for an audiological and speech-language testing. You will use your professional judgment to decide if referrals are also needed for social work, occupational therapy, physical therapy, mental health services, etc. So I'll give you an example of what happens in Roger's case. Roger's pediatrician recognized there were lots of issues with Roger and that his mom was looking for lots of help for intervention. The doctor recommended further testing and services through the early intervention program and asked to have a copy of the report sent back to him. The doctor also referred Roger for an audiological evaluation, which he passed, and conducted a lead screen, which was normal. The early intervention program administered a range of measures and determined that Roger met the eligibility for criteria for enrollment in early intervention. One of the measures that was administered was the modified checklist for autism in toddlers, or the MCHAT, which Roger failed, suggesting the need to see an autism specialist. The program also interviewed Roger's parents to look at family stressors, mental health issues, and other external contributors to Roger's difficulties, but felt the family was healthy and coping well under the circumstances. The early intervention program explained these results in a letter back to the doctor and suggested that Roger be placed on a waiting list for the autism specialist at the local university. while the program continued to work with him and his family. I'll again summarize each of the 5 pathways and then provide a more in-depth explanation of each pathway. Path A indicates a high risk for developmental disabilities and warrants referrals. Path B indicates a moderate risk for developmental disabilities and warrants additional screening, monitoring, and developmental promotion. Path C indicates a risk for social and emotional, behavioral, and mental health issues, which places the child at low risk for developmental disabilities. You will provide parent education, monitoring, and/or additional behavioral screening. Path D indicates problems with parent communication and a moderate risk for disabilities. Hands-on screening will occur. Path E indicates a low risk of developmental or behavioral disabilities. You will provide reassurance to the parent. Path A indicates a high risk of developmental disabilities. You will promptly refer the child for further evaluation. Based on the age, you will either refer to AZIP or Child Find. You will determine the type of evaluations the child will receive based on the types of concerns and using your clinical judgment. You may refer to a speech-language evaluation, a developmental evaluation, evaluations of audiology, vision, social work, or mental health. In addition, you may use the MCHAT screening tool, the modified checklist for autism in toddlers. You will receive training on how to administer later on in the training video. Path B indicates a moderate risk for developmental disabilities. You will screen further and refer for additional screening. If the child does not qualify for services, you will utilize developmental promotions such as Head Start or after-school tutoring. You will also frequently monitor the child's development. Path C indicates a low risk for developmental disabilities and a risk of social and emotional, behavioral, and mental health issues. If the child is less than 4 years, you will advise the parent and provide written information. You will also monitor frequently. If the child is older than 4 years, there is an increased risk of mental health problems. You will refer for counseling and a mental health screening. Path D indicates there are communication issues between the parent and health provider. This may be a language barrier, the parent may be a teenager, or the parent may have serious mental health or language issues. This path is rare. However, when it does occur, you will refer for hands-on screening, such as the PEDS DM or PEDS Developmental Milestones. This is a measure that can be used with the PEDS or by itself. Brigance, a family of assessment, screening, and instructional tools. Or the ASQ, an Ages and Stages questionnaire. Path E indicates a low risk for developmental disabilities or social behavioral problems. This is the most common path that will occur, and you will provide assurance to the parent. Now let's take some time to look at additional examples of the PEDS administration with more case studies. Amy and Billy. Amy is 27 months old. Here's a portion of her PEDS paper response form. Her parents' only concerns are that Amy is not interested in toilet training and still likes to use a pacifier. No other concerns were listed by the parent nor by the health provider. You will categorize the reported concerns under the 2-year column for behavior for the comment that she likes to use a pacifier and for self-help for the comment that Amy is not interested in toilet training. These concerns exist in the unshaded boxes or non-significant concerns that are not predictive of a developmental disability. You will total the number of check marks, in this case 2, into the large unshaded box at the bottom of the form. No concerns were reported that reside in the unshaded box. Referring to your interpretation form, you will locate the path for Amy based on the score of 2 non-significant concerns. You will choose Path C. You will counsel the parent in the areas of difficulty and follow up with Amy and her family in several weeks. If counseling and/or follow-up is unsuccessful, you will screen for emotional and/or behavioral problems and refer as indicated. Otherwise, you will refer for parent training, behavioral intervention, etc. You will record your decisions, referrals, and advice that you provide to the parent directly onto the longitudinal form. So this is what happened with Amy. Because self-help concerns are not highly predictive of developmental problems, Amy's pediatrician followed Path C, in which his first action was to ask the mother what she thought about Amy's difficulty learning to use the toilet, or giving up a pacifier. The mother stated that in her opinion, Amy was not yet ready to do either of those things. The provider agreed and offered anticipatory guidance regarding signs of toilet readiness. He also provided information sheets on toilet training and pacifier weaning. Our last example is Billy. He is 3 years old. Here's a portion of Billy's response form. His parents' concerns are that Billy is kind of quiet and doesn't say very much. He seems to prefer watching to interacting. They are a little concerned about how Billy talks and makes speech sounds, reporting, "As I said, I don't think he talks as well as he should for his age. Otherwise, he's just loving, watching everything carefully, figures things out quickly, he's very bright." There are no concerns as to how Billy understands what is said to him, nor are there any additional concerns made by the parent or the health provider. This is an example of a score form that has been used longitudinally from birth until now. You will categorize the reported concerns in the 3-year column under expressive language for the comment that he does not talk as well for his age, and under social and emotional for the comment he is kind of quiet and doesn't say much. One of these concerns resides in the shaded box, or significant concerns that are predictive of a developmental disability, and the other concerns reside in the unshaded boxes, or non-significant concerns that are not predictive of a developmental disability. You will total the number of check marks, in this case 1 in the large shaded box at the bottom of the form and 1 in the large unshaded box at the bottom of the form. Referring to your interpretation form, you will locate the path for Billy based on his score of 1 significant concern and 1 non-significant concern. You will choose path B. So here's a look into what Billy's doctor did. He gave a second stage screen in the office on the same day. A hands-on measure like the Brigance screen is a good alternative to the Denver 2 and far more accurate, but is most workable in practices with a nurse practitioner or developmental specialist. Or you could use a measure like the MCHAT, the Ages and Stages questionnaire, or the Preschool Developmental Inventory, which depends largely on parent report and takes about 15 minutes to administer. The PDI was used on the same day in this case. His doctor also referred him to an early intervention program for additional screening, which is at no cost to the family, and sent the family home with a detailed and lengthier screen like the Modified Checklist of Autism in Toddlers, MCHAT, or the Ages and Stages questionnaire, the ASQ, along with a stamped envelope so they can return it later after trying the various items out at home. The second stage screen was passed. Although this might lead you to breathe easy, the PEDS research shows that this is a seemingly false positive. Result still leaves Billy in a mild at-risk category. He is a child for whom developmental promotion and watchful waiting is recommended. Billy's mom was given suggestions for promoting language at home and asked to return in 4 months to review the progress.
Now we will discuss when to screen for autism spectrum disorders. This is an algorithm very similar to the algorithm we saw within the PEDS training tool. This algorithm is based on the American Academy of Pediatrics' current recommendations for surveillance and screening in autism spectrum disorders. This recommends ASD surveillance, that unstructured and ongoing assessment, at well child checks, and an ASD screening tool used at 18 and 24 months, or when and if that ongoing surveillance demonstrates a risk. When we do have concerning results from either surveillance or screening, simultaneous referrals are recommended. Number 1, a comprehensive evaluation of ASD. This includes referral to a developmental pediatrician or an ASD specialist. Number 2, early intervention or early childhood education services. And number 3, an audiology evaluation. The MCHAT stands for the Modified Checklist for Autism in Toddlers. It is a screening tool to assess the risk of autism spectrum disorders. It indicates a risk, but it does not diagnose autism. It is validated for children 16 to 30 months of age. It identifies 85% of children at risk of ASDs correctly, This is the tool's sensitivity. It identifies 93% of children not at risk for ASDs correctly. This is the tool's specificity. It takes 5 to 10 minutes for parents to complete and 2 minutes or less for the staff to score. Here's an example of the MCHAT form. The MCHAT form is 23 questions consisting of both critical and non-critical items. The screening is considered failed if any 2 critical items are failed or any 3 total items are failed. The MCHAT is parent completed. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to complete. It can be done on paper, and it can also be done online with an automatic scoring system. The University of Arizona South Campus Clinic will be utilizing the online automatic scoring option. So just for your knowledge, in case access to the online scoring is limited, we wanted to briefly discuss some of the specifics of manually scoring the MCHAT. The MCHAT has both straight and reverse scoring questions. Straight questions, a no indicates a fail. For example, does your child take interest in other children? An answer of no would indicate a fail. For reverse questions, a yes indicates a fail. For example, does your child ever seem oversensitive to noise? An answer of yes would indicate a fail. You score each failed item. You will total the number of critical items failed and the number of total items failed. Remember that 2 critical items or 3 total items failed equals a fail on the MCHAT. There is an MCHAT scoring template that you can print on an overhead transparency if you need it. There's also an MCHAT Excel scoring sheet, and as we said before, there is an online automatic scoring option which you will be utilizing. The MCHAT is failed if 2 or more critical items are failed or if any 3 total items are failed. MCHAT follow-up interviews are recommended for each of the failed items. If 8 or more items are failed on the MCHAT and the responses are considered appropriate, you can skip the follow-up interview because that MCHAT is considered failed. We would like the staff to conduct the MCHAT follow-up interview for children that fail the MCHAT screener. This is designed to reduce false positives. You will perform the follow-up interview for failed items on the MCHAT. There is an available paper MCHAT follow-up interview at the following website that we have provided. Here is an example of the follow-up interview algorithm. This walks you through the process of how to talk to parents about the missed questions on the MCHAT. This will be provided for your future reference within the PowerPoint.
Let's take a look at John and the MCHAT. John is 18 months old. At the well child check, the parent reported that John does not walk yet. He does not talk and only makes some sounds. He does not answer to his name being called. Mom wonders if John cannot hear well. Mom also reports that John does not seem to play with other children, but instead does his own thing. 5 critical items exist on the MCHAT. John has quote-unquote failed 4 items on the MCHAT. Upon review, you will see that of the 4 items that John has failed, 2 of those items are critical items. These items are, does your child respond to his name when it is called? Does your child take an interest in other children? A follow-up interview is conducted by the physician to learn more about the responses provided for the critical items. You can see on this diagram that after you have learned that John does not respond to his name, you will ask, what does he do when you call his name? If the parent answers no response or responds only if touched, this response indicates a second fail on question 14 in the follow-up interview. To review, John has failed 4 questions. A follow-up interview is conducted into the 4 questions that were failed. John continues to fail these questions. The MCHAT results are considered a negative screening or a screening that indicates concern. You will now present and discuss the findings of the MCHAT with John's parents. You will share that John's screening test for autism spectrum disorder indicates a concern. You will explain that screenings are to learn if further evaluation is needed. In this case, John does need further evaluation. You will explain to the family that after further evaluation, a child may or may not be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. If they are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, they will benefit from early intervention services. You will make simultaneous referrals to a developmental pediatrician or an autism spectrum disorder specialist for a comprehensive autism spectrum disorder evaluation, to early intervention or early childhood education services, and for an audiology evaluation. You will provide the parent with reading materials. You will schedule an early targeted follow-up visit. This concludes the Well Child exam, which you will bill as B20.2.
So as of March 2013, a total scoring option is recommended for the MCHAT. You have been provided training on the original MCHAT scoring, and we will send a PowerPoint which will include all 3 MCHAT scoring options. The options are the MCHAT with initial scoring and follow-up interview, the MCHAT with updated scoring, and the MCHAT RF, the MCHAT revised and follow-up. Here is our list for the resources for online PEDS and MCHAT.
Thank you for viewing our video. We hope that you are successful in the implementation of the PEDS and MCHAT at your clinic. Feel free to contact me, Erin, Catherine Mahosky, and/or Dr. Rice.